This is the story of the bicycle shop that beat the U.S. government in the autumn of 1903. The most powerful nation on Earth spent $50,000 trying to fly. Two brothers who repaired bicycles spent less than $1,000. Only one of them left the ground. For 4,000 years, the sky was the one thing humans could not take. We crossed the oceans. We split the atom's ancestors in fire and iron. We built cathedrals that scraped the clouds, but the air belonged to the birds, and every man who reached for it came back broken or didn't come back at all. Then, on a freezing beach in North Carolina, in 12 seconds, it was over. This is how we solved the sky. The dream is older than the written word, but the men who chased it all made the same mistake. In the 9th century, in Cordoba, a scholar named Abbas ibn Firnas covered himself in feathers and silk and threw himself off a hill. He stayed up briefly. He landed on his back and never fully recovered. Afterwards, he said his error was that he had forgotten to build a tail. 200 years later, an English monk named Aylmer climbed the tower of Malmesbury Abbey, strapped wings to his arms, and jumped. He glided roughly 200 meters before the ground took both his legs. He limped for the rest of his life, and he said the same thing Ibn Firnas said. He forgot the tail. 5 centuries after that, Leonardo da Vinci filled hundreds of pages with flying machines. Screws that bite into air, wings of wood and canvas, worked by pulleys and human legs. Leonardo was the smartest man alive, and he was completely wrong, because he assumed what everyone assumed. That to fly like a bird, you must flap like a bird. A human being generates roughly 1/10 of the power needed to lift their own body by flapping. That is not an engineering problem, that is a wall. 400 years of men fell off towers into that wall. In 1799, in a manor house in Yorkshire, a young baronet named George Cayley took a small silver disc and engraved it. On one side, a machine with a fixed wing, a tail, and a body. On the other, a diagram showing 4 arrows: lift, drag, thrust, and weight. That silver disc is the airplane, because Cayley had done the one thing nobody had thought to do. He took the bird apart. He realized the wing does 2 jobs at once, and a machine doesn't have to. Let a fixed wing make the lift. Let a separate engine make the thrust. Stop flapping. Every aircraft that has ever flown obeys the disc. In 1853, at the age of 79, Cayley built a glider and put his coachman in it. The machine flew across Brompton Dale. The coachman climbed out of the wreckage and reportedly quit on the spot. He'd been hired to drive, he said, not to fly. Cayley had the shape. He had the theory. What he did not have was an engine light enough to matter. Steam was iron and water and coal, and it weighed a ton. He died in 1857. The sky closed for another 40 years. The man who reopened it built his own hill. Otto Lilienthal was a German engineer who did something no one before him had bothered with. He flew, repeatedly, not once in front of a crowd, praying, over and over. He piled up an artificial mound outside Berlin so he could launch into any wind, and between 1891 and 1896, he made around 2,000 flights. He was also the first human being ever photographed in the air, and that mattered more than the flights themselves, because those photographs went into newspapers on every continent, and for the first time, flight stopped being a joke. Lilienthal published his measurements, tables of lift, real numbers. He turned a fantasy into a discipline. On the 9th of August, 1896, a gust stalled his glider at 15 meters. He dropped straight down and broke his spine. He died the next day. His reported last words were 6 words in German. Sacrifices must be made. 4,000 miles away in Dayton, Ohio, a bicycle mechanic read that obituary. He later wrote that Lilienthal's death lit something in him. That never went out. His name was Wilbur Wright. Now, The other man, Samuel Pierpont Langley, was the secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, an astronomer, a physicist, a member of every academy worth belonging to. In 1896, Langley launched an unmanned steam-powered model over the Potomac River and flew it more than a kilometer. It was the first serious proof that a heavier-than-air machine could sustain itself. It was a genuine achievement, so the United States War Department handed him $50,000. In today's money, well over $1.5 million. The Smithsonian added 20,000 more. Langley built the great aerodrome, manned, fired off a catapult on the roof of a houseboat in the middle of the Potomac. October 7th, 1903. Reporters on the bank. The catapult fired. The aerodrome left the rails, folded, and went straight into the river. One reporter wrote that it dropped like a handful of mortar. December 8th, 1903. Second attempt. It came apart on launch, and the pilot nearly drowned under the ice. The press ate him alive. Congress called it a national embarrassment. 2 months before that final crash, the New York Times ran an editorial arguing that a real flying machine might take mathematicians and engineers, somewhere between 1 million and 10 million years, to develop. That editorial ran, 9 weeks before Kitty Hawk, Langley had money, credentials, an engine. The backing of a government. He was missing exactly one thing. He had never seriously asked how to steer. Dayton, Ohio. The Wright Cycle Company, a shop that sold, repaired, and built bicycles. Wilbur Wright, 36. Orville Wright, 32. Neither of them had a college degree. Neither of them, in the end, even held a high school diploma. No patron, no grant, no laboratory. They funded the conquest of the air, out of a cash register, and bicycles gave them the insight that every trained expert had missed. A bicycle is unstable. It does not stay up because it is balanced. It stays up because the rider is correcting it, continuously, without thinking. Every other inventor was trying to build an aircraft that flew itself, stable, self-righting, like a boat that can't tip. Something a passenger could sit in. The Wrights assumed the opposite. The machine will be unstable. That's fine. The pilot flies it. Flying is a skill, not a delivery. So the problem was no longer lift. It was roll. How do you tip a wing on purpose and not die? Wilbur watched buzzards circling over the Miami River, and he saw it. When a buzzard banks, it doesn't tilt like a plank. It twists, one wingtip up, the other wingtip down. And then, in the shop, he was turning a long cardboard inner tube box over in his hands, and he twisted the ends in opposite directions. The box stayed rigid, but the two ends now faced different angles. Wing warping. That's the invention. Not the wing, not the engine, not the propeller. The twist. They wrote to the U.S. Weather Bureau and asked, essentially, where does the wind blow hard and steady, and what's underneath it? The answer was a sandbar off North Carolina called Kitty Hawk Steady Wind. Soft landings. Nobody watching. Their 1900 glider was disappointing. Their 1901 glider was worse. It produced roughly a third of the lift the published equations promised. On the train home from that failure, Wilbur told his brother that man would not fly for 1,000 years. And then they did the thing that separates them from everyone in this story. They stopped trusting the books. They built a wind tunnel out of a wooden box about 6 feet long with a fan bolted to one end, and over 2 months in the autumn of 1901, they tested somewhere near 200 different wing shapes. They found that Lilienthal's tables were wrong, and they found that Smeaton's coefficient, a number engineers had been plugging into lift equations for over 130 years, was wrong too, badly wrong. In a bicycle shop, in 8 weeks, 2 men with no scientific training produced better aerodynamic data than the entire previous century. The 1902 glider flew 1,000 times. They linked a movable rear rudder directly to the wing warping, which killed the last hidden problem, the yaw that dragged a banking machine sideways. Now they had control on all 3 axes, roll, pitch, yaw, linked. Every airplane in the sky above you right now uses that system. They needed an engine. No manufacturer in America would build one light enough, so their shop mechanic, Charlie Taylor, built one himself in 6 weeks, 12 horsepower, cast from aluminum, made with a lathe and a drill press, and then the last piece. Everyone treated propellers as screws that bore through the air. The Wrights realized a propeller isn't a screw at all, it's a wing, rotating. Their first propellers hit about 66% efficiency. Modern ones reached the mid-80s. They got 2/3 of the way to the modern answer from scratch on the first try. Kill Devil Hills, December 14, 1903. They flipped a coin. Wilbur won. He overcorrected on takeoff, stalled, and put the machine into the sand. 3 days of repairs. December 17th. Freezing. 27-mile-an-hour wind. Far more than they wanted. Puddles frozen over. 5 witnesses, mostly men from the local life-saving station, standing around a machine they clearly thought was a waste of a morning. Orville's turn. 10:35 a.m. He lies flat on his stomach on the lower wing. Hip cradle strapped across him. He slips the restraining wire. 12 seconds. 120 feet. Sit with that number. A Boeing 747's wingspan is longer than the entire first flight in history. One of the lifesavers, John Daniels, was standing behind a camera on a tripod. He had never operated a camera in his life. Orville had pre-aimed it and told him to squeeze the bulb. He squeezed, and he took the single most important photograph in the history of transport first try by accident. They flew 3 more times that morning. The 4th was Wilbur, 59 seconds, 852 feet. Then, on the ground, a gust caught the Flyer, tumbled it, and destroyed it. It never flew again. They walked back to the life-saving station and wired their father 4 words. Success, 4 flights, Thursday. The telegraph operator garbled it. He turned 59 seconds into 57. And he misspelled Orville's name. Their father took the news to the Dayton Journal. The paper passed. 57 seconds, the editor reportedly said. Simply wasn't long enough to be interesting. Here's the part nobody tells you. The world didn't believe them for 5 years. The Wrights went back to Ohio and kept flying in a cow pasture called Huffman Prairie, 8 miles outside Dayton, next to a streetcar line. By 1905, their Flyer 3 could stay airborne for 39 minutes and carve figure eights over the field. That is a practical airplane in 1905. And almost nobody came. Reporters a short streetcar ride away did not bother to look, because the claim was too absurd to be worth checking. Then the Wrights made it worse. They stopped flying in public entirely, refusing to demonstrate anything until someone signed a contract, terrified of being copied before their patent held. A French aviator who had spent 2 years calling them bluffers said 6 words afterwards. "We are beaten. We don't exist." In one afternoon, the argument ended forever. 6 weeks later, at Fort Myer, Virginia, Orville was demonstrating for the same army that had funded Langley. A propeller cracked in flight. The Flyer went in. Orville was badly injured. His passenger, Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge, was killed, the first person in history to die in an airplane. The sky was open, and it had already started charging admission. Watch how fast it goes now. 1909, Blériot crosses the English Channel. Britain stops being an island. 1914, 11 years after Kitty Hawk. Men are dying from the air over France. 1915, Lindbergh crosses the Atlantic alone. 1916, the first jet. 1917, the sound barrier. The moon, 66 years. From 120 feet of North Carolina sand to the Sea of Tranquility, a single human lifetime. There were people alive to watch both. And one man understood exactly what that meant. Every Apollo astronaut was allowed a small personal kit, a few ounces of whatever they wanted to carry with them. When Neil Armstrong flew to the moon, he brought a scrap of muslin cut from the left wing of the 1903 Wright Flyer and a splinter of its wooden propeller. They landed. They came home, which means the first airplane ever built has now flown farther than any airplane ever will.